Former Georgia Senator David Perdue has been Donald Trump's ride or die since even before they both lost statewide in Georgia in 2020. When Trump wasn't able to complete his coup, he endorsed Perdue unequivocally over and over again against Georgia's incumbent Republican governor, Brian Kemp, who Trump blamed for their dual defeats.
A friend of mine and a great senator, a man who, I don't know, are you going to run for governor, David Perdue? Are you going to run for governor?
We're going to support a great gentleman.
He's a great guy, a wonderful man, an incredible family, and who really got screwed by Kemp. Is the only candidate in this race who can beat Stacey the Hoax Abrams.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? I just love when he feels good about another person in his life, because he seems like someone who needs that. It's a beautiful friendship. Only now it looks fairly obvious that both losers may lose again. A Fox News poll this week shows Kemp leading Perdue by a whopping 32 points. Ouch. And now Trump is chucking his buddy under the bus. NBC News national political reporter Mark Caputo reports, quote, Trump seems to have given his campaign up for dead and isn't planning to make any more personal appearances in Georgia on Perdue's behalf. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what will be a really important primary election in Georgia next week. Mark Caputo joins me to talk about it all now. Mark, welcome. Mark, just before this segment, I saw some reporting. It turns out that according to federal election filings, Trump's actually transferred $2 million from his political operation, Perdue, which for Trump is really a lot. Like, he's pretty stingy with that. He really did do everything he could for Perdue.
No, he did. One of the people we quoted in our story that you just referenced, an advisor to Donald Trump, said Donald Trump has done more to help elect David Perdue than David Perdue. In the eyes of Trump, from those we've spoken to who have spoken to him, he just doesn't think that Perdue has done enough. He hasn't campaigned hard enough. He hasn't raised enough money. He hasn't hit the hustings in the right way. His message is bad. That's as described to us from, what Trump says. And if you talk to Republicans in Georgia, they'll tell you the same thing. They've always said that, Perdue wasn't a very good candidate. He was a guy who didn't really like voters, they say, didn't really like making fundraising calls, didn't like giving campaign speeches. And that's a real job hazard if you're a politician.
Yeah, it also strikes me, and I'm not in Georgia and haven't reported directly on the race, but I've followed it quite closely, that there was never any defining logic for Perdue's primary challenge other than the obvious one, which is that Donald Trump had a grudge against Kemp over the 2020 election. And in the end, that's not enough, even for Republican primary voters.
Right. And it's difficult to dislodge an incumbent in your own party when he's running for re-election and he aligns with the party in almost every way that the average rank and file Republican voter does. And Kemp, at the same time, was delivering conservative goodies, one bill after another during the legislative session. He had a very good session. He was able to raise money through it and raise his profile through free media. So Perdue was really up against it's kind of a suicide mission to engage in the first place. But, he decided to go along with it, and he kind of trashed his friendship. Him and Perdue and Kemp used to be friends, or at least political allies. That's certainly not the case anymore.
So there's another primary that I think is even more important than this one, which has Raffensperger. And it's like what we've seen in Pennsylvania, where you've got Mastriano. Yeah. When you got someone who just explicitly is running on a basically like, I would have done the coup in 2020. I will be open to overturning the will of the voters agenda. That's what Jody Hice challenging Raffensperger. Raffensperger, famously the Secretary of State, who refused to do that. We don't have a ton of polling. It looks like Raffensperger is ahead, but that's definitely a huge high-stakes one to watch on Tuesday.
It is. And if you would have spoken to me or a bunch of folks, certainly people in Georgia in 2021, in January 2021 or thereabouts, they would have just told you that Raffensperger was a dead man walking. And now, as you said, you referenced those sparse polls we've seen. We've also been told about other polling from other campaigns that have tracked this race. It does look like the Raffensperger is going to come out on top. He's probably not going to be able to crack 50%, they say, and therefore it's going to probably be in a runoff between him and Hice. But the reality is that there's a possibility, I should say, the anti-Raffensperger fervor, the pro-Trump, like, we've got to throw the bastards out, and we've got to get all these new people in, and we can't have another election like we had in 2020. That fervor might be dying. And there's a good possibility that, this 60% of Republicans, assuming that the Fox News poll is right, these Republicans who are going to vote in a majority, it appears, for Governor Kemp, those are going to be the same electorate, the same voters who are going to wind up voting, the same type of voters, wind up voting in a runoff with Raffensperger. And there's a good possibility these people are going to ask themselves, like, well, I voted for Kemp when Trump told me not to, and, I'm kind of moving beyond the 2020 stolen election lie. So why should I replace Raffensperger? And, there's a possibility that Raffensperger might win and really kind of upend what was our conventional logic just a few months ago.
Yeah, that seems to me. I mean, we've been tracing a few of these. There was that Idaho primary challenge earlier this week where, to me, just from a sort of pro-democracy standpoint, right, like, these are really important races. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight because I'm not a Republican and I don't have a dog in the fight otherwise. But in this case, you do have an explicit Jody Hice saying it was stolen, big lie. Raffensperger should have done what Trump said. Raffensperger saying no. You've also got the primary. You've got Herschel Walker, the former University of Georgia football star and NFL football star, who doesn't really live in Georgia, lives in Texas, but was basically recruited by Trump. And despite lots of misgivings from the Republican establishment, looks like he's going to cruise the nomination to take on Raphael Warnock in what's going to be a marquee race. And there's still a lot of worry about how Herschel Walker stands up in a general election.
Well, there is, and you've seen in the primary, Herschel Walker came into the primary. He wasn't really coronated, albeit he is going to win by a large margin, it appears. And his opponents, Gary Black in specific, in the GOP primary, he's let Walker have it. And all of these stories have come out about Walker and these domestic abuse allegations, his use of firearms, his apparent lack of honesty, according to the reports. Those things are going to start to wear into him. And one of the things that Herschel Walker is going to learn that a lot of celebrity candidates learn, just ask Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, you can start running for office as a celebrity, but there's probably nothing worse for your brand than to go into a political campaign, because, political campaigns are marketing campaigns, and they sell the candidates the same way that, like, Coca-Cola sells soda. And what winds up happening, though, unlike in a conventional marketing campaign, in a political campaign, if there's Coke versus Pepsi, well, Pepsi is going to spend $50 million telling you how terrible Coke is. Yeah. And that's what's happening with Herschel Walker. That's going to be a bruising campaign before that one's over between him and Warnock.